Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Egyptians seek a more balanced vote in second round of parliamentary elections. Obama's speech at Fort Bragg marks end of Iraq war. And Syria faces a surge of violence as Assad's brigades invade Hama and kill 32 civilians. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now. Voting continues in the second round of the Egyptian general elections and will last until tomorrow, Thursday. Over 18 million Egyptian constituents are expected to take part in the vote. This round covers 9 provinces, including Giza, Suez, and Ismaili. The Egyptian High Elections Commission decided to shut down 6 electoral committees at Shajarat al-Dur school in Giza. The Egyptian High Elections Commission decided to shut down 6 electoral committees at Shajarat al-Dur school in the Giza constituency after it received allegations that the judges supervising these committees rigged the vote in favor of the Freedom and Justice Party. The judges completely denied these allegations.
Since early morning, Egyptians have been flocking to the polls. The turnouts are medium in some areas and high in others. The second round, which will last 2 days, covers 9 provinces: Giza, Munufia, Sharqiya, Bahira, Ismailia, Suez, Beni Suef, Sohag, and Aswan. Nearly 19 million voters are expected to participate in this round, in which over 3,300 candidates are competing for 180 seats in the parliament. The voters unanimously agreed that this year's elections are different from any elections in the past.
Last year, there were no real elections. It was a mockery. They forced people not to vote. But this year is different. There's actually freedom, democracy, and the turnout is high.
This is the first time I'm voting. Today is the very first time that I'm voting, after all these long years.
Since the Islamist groups gained apparent advantage in the first round of elections by winning around 60% of the votes, Egyptians seem eager to achieve some kind of balance for the representation in parliament in this round.
We need a balance among the political parties in parliament in order for it to speak for all people. There should also be a fair representation for the minorities in the People's Assembly.
I hope that the parliament will represent all groups equally. There is competition among the parliamentary representatives, but this rivalry should only be for the interests of the citizens.
The second round is not free of the violations that occurred in the first round. Despite the military force's announcement of its determination to remove any form of campaigning at the polling stations, reports indicate election campaigning took place right in front of the electoral committees in certain constituencies. In addition, vote buying was reported in other constituencies. Clashes with firearms among supporters of the candidates hindered the voting process for hours at the polling stations in the 2 provinces of Giza and Sharqiya. The elections were postponed in 3 constituencies, Bahira, Munufia, and Sohag, due to the judicial rulings to include the lists of political parties on the ballots. Foreign governments continue to monitor the election process in this round.
تواصلت في هذه المرحلة أيضا ومثلما سألت السفيرة الأمريكية في القاهرة الناخبين عن تجربة.
As the U.S. ambassador to Cairo asked voters about their experience in the elections, the voters also took the chance to ask her about the U.S.'s stance on the Islamists' lead in the first round of elections.
The American government will work with the people that the Egyptians elect, whomever they may be.
أما المصريون في الخارج فقد انتهت عمليات التصويت بالنسبة لهم بالأمس.
As for overseas Egyptians, the voting ended for them yesterday. Their vote count is expected to end today. Data indicates that 70% of expatriate Egyptians voted, which is 10% higher than in the first round. Mohammed Sayed, BBC.
And that's going to be the subject of our news analysis coming up at 18:32 GMT. You do want to check it out. Moving on to other news, thousands of residents of the Iraqi city of Fallujah have celebrated the withdrawal of American soldiers from their country. The demonstrators set the U.S. flag on fire. The demonstrators shouted slogans in support of what they called resistance against American invaders. Fallujah has a population of about 500,000 people and is located west of the capital, Baghdad. The city was attacked by U.S. forces in 2004 and 2005. The U.S. military used white phosphorus against the city and killed hundreds of civilians. The city also saw a rise in the number of birth defects in the years following the attacks. Later on, research found that the U.S. had used depleted uranium. This comes as all U.S. troops must leave Iraq by the end of December. However, reports say thousands of military advisors and diplomats will remain in the country as part of the U.S. embassy personnel in Baghdad. Nearly 9 years after the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq, U.S. President Barack Obama has marked a symbolic end to the war. The President and First Lady Michelle welcomed some of the last troops returning home at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. Obama paid tribute to the troops who died or were injured in the prolonged battle. Nearly 4,500 American service members and at least 60,000 Iraqis were killed in the aftermath of the invasion. Obama acknowledged that the post-war Iraq is not a perfect place and has many challenges ahead. Still, he argued that Iraq is now a stable country with a government elected by its people. All U.S. soldiers are scheduled to pull out of Iraq by the end of this month.
Top story: clashes erupted a short time ago here in Jerusalem between police and right-wing extremists. The police raided a location in the Kiryat Moshe neighborhood in order to arrest suspects in connection to the recent price tag attacks. When they arrived, officers were met with organized resistance from activists trying to prevent the suspects from being detained. During the melee, the right-wingers confronted officers, slashed tires and smashed windows of several police vehicles. 6 rioters were detained for questioning, and police searched the apartment, confiscating various items and documents to be used as evidence. In what is believed to be yet another price tag operation, an abandoned mosque was torched in the ultra-Orthodox Jewish neighborhood here in Jerusalem overnight. Firefighters who responded to the blaze on Strauss Street said that they discovered hate graffiti against Arabs and Muslims and the words price tag sprayed on the outer walls. The building was slightly damaged from soot and smoke. Early this morning, Jerusalem municipal officials were dispatched to the scene, and a cleanup crew was brought in to repair the damages and paint over the graffiti. Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkat strongly denounced the arson, saying that Israel must show zero tolerance for any kind of violence and must work to maintain coexistence. In a separate incident, 2 Palestinian vehicles in the West Bank were spray-painted and set on fire early this morning. Those involved in so-called price tag attacks should be classified as terrorists. That was a recommendation of Justice Minister Yaakov Ne'eman and Internal Security Minister Yitzhak Aharonovich after a meeting to discuss how to cope with a recent wave of extremist right-wing violence. If approved, this should give the defense and legal establishment more leeway in dealing with the emerging phenomenon. Defense Minister Ehud Barak said this morning that there is no doubt that these acts are in fact terrorism and that Jewish perpetrators should be treated accordingly. Prime Minister Netanyahu and IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Benny Gantz have strongly condemned the settler violence against the army. Netanyahu spoke out on the issue 3 times yesterday, insisting that those involved be prosecuted with a heavy hand. He said that punishing such criminals is essential to Israeli sovereignty. For his part, the IDF Chief of Staff echoed Netanyahu's sentiments and called the attack on the army base unfathomable. Gantz said that this incident and Monday night's breach of a closed military zone on the Jordanian border are dangerous and unacceptable. In a fierce statement to the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee today, former Defense Minister Binyamin Ben-Eliezer said that soldiers should have used deadly force against the gang of criminals who raided the Ephraim military base. The soldiers clashed with intruders and arrested several of them, but Ben-Eliezer said it was a shame they didn't open fire. He went on to say, if someone attempts to kill you, you kill them first. Ben-Eliezer charged that the right-wing activist nearly murdered an IDF commander and called the attack a clear act of terrorism. The former defense minister reiterated that it doesn't matter if the perpetrators are Jews or Arabs, this type of action must be stopped. The Mugrhabi Bridge connecting the Western Wall Plaza to the Temple Mount was reopened this morning, just 2 days after being closed by the Jerusalem municipality. The move was taken under the condition that a fire truck be stationed nearby so that the ramp will not go up in flames. National Union MKs Uri Ariel and Aryeh Eldad visited the Temple Mount today via that bridge and called on the government to erect a sound structure rather than rely on temporary measures.
Syrian activists confirmed that Assad's brigades stormed the city of Hama and killed 32 civilians. Meanwhile, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights announced the deaths of 8 Syrian troops in an ambush set up by defectors in the countryside of Hama. This news comes as the opposition's strike enters its 4th day.
A heinous military escalation was launched by Assad's brigades in an attempt to minimize the effects of the anti-regime strike and also to prevent the Syrian opposition from escalating its mobilization to stage a civil disobedience campaign.
فقد ذكرت المواقع الإلكترونية التابعة للمعارضة السورية أن 5 مدنيين
Syrian opposition websites reported that 5 civilians were killed today in the early morning hours. The victims were on their way to the city of Kalat Madik when their car was hit by an artillery shell near the town of Khatab, west of Hama.
في منطقة الحاضر في حماة بالرصاص الحي والقذائف المدفعية بهدف.
The sources added that residential homes in the area of Hadar came under live fire and artillery shelling in an attempt to terrorize the residents. In response, the Free Syrian Army set up a retaliatory ambush targeting a group of 4 military jeeps. 8 Syrian troops were killed in the ambush.
عن مجازر تستهدف السكان. وصل الأمن السوري اقتحام عدد من القرى والمدن وسط.
And amid reports of massacres committed against residents, Syrian security forces stormed several cities and villages. Incoming reports confirmed that Assad's brigades attempted to besiege the town of Harak and Daraa and imposed a curfew in its eastern areas amid sporadic gunfire. In the town of al-Bukamal, Assad's brigades have reportedly carried out acts of robbery and arson, targeting businesses taking part in the strike. Amid the spread of street protests, the Syrian army is facing a new wave of defections. Colonel Ahmad al-Sheikh and a group of officers announced their defection to the Free Syrian Army.
I'm Colonel Ahmad Mohammed al-Sheikh with the 146th Brigade Ground Forces. I hereby announce my defection from the beast's deadly gangs due to their crimes against the civilians demanding freedom and dignity.
These developments coincided with the second round of the general strike launched last Sunday. The second round of the strike includes powering off mobile phones for 4 straight hours, shutting down schools, and cutting off main roads leading to the city as well as to the town's entrances. The third phase of the strike includes wide participation by the education sector, most notably university councils. The fourth stage will target the transportation sector in a bid to paralyze it, as well as shut down the main roads between the cities. The fifth stage includes a strike by state employees, which will be followed by the closure of international highways, marking the beginning of the 6th and last phase. The anti-regime residents took to the streets at night in massive demonstrations, following a bloody day that claimed the lives of more than 40 people across various regions in the country. Most of the violence and killing against the demonstrators took place in Idlib province.
Tens of thousands of Yemenis staged a massive demonstration in the capital, Sana'a, demanding the collapse of the Riyadh Agreement and the resignation of Basindua's government. In Taz province, south of the capital, a massive demonstration was held to denounce the new government and the Riyadh Agreement signed between President Ali Abdullah Saleh and the Joint Meeting Parties, JMP. The protesters who rallied in front of the provincial building said that the coalition government doesn't represent them, adding that any government that doesn't emerge from the Freedom and Change squares, quote, lacks legitimacy. The demonstrators also vowed to continue their escalation until President Saleh's and the JMP's regime is toppled. They viewed the Saudi-sponsored agreement as a foreign and internal conspiracy aimed at aborting their revolution. In the coastal city of Hudaydah, a massive demonstration was held demanding the collapse of the Riyadh Agreement brokered between President Ali Abdullah Saleh and the JMP. The demonstrators also demanded the trial of elements within Saleh's regime. Today, the Bahraini village of Qaria witnessed brutal crackdowns by the authorities' forces against peaceful demonstrators demanding the downfall of the regime. The authorities fired live ammunition, rubber bullets, sound bombs, and tear gas at the protesters. Also in Bahrain, the residents of Akhr village took to the streets in a massive demonstration denouncing the demolition of mosques by the Saudi-backed regime's forces as part of a policy adopted since the spark of protests last February. Under the slogan Bahrain without human rights, Bahraini opposition groups held a sit-in rally in front of the UN headquarters in the capital, Manama. The demonstrators protested the silence of international organizations on the human rights violations committed by the authorities against the Bahraini people. Representatives from the various political blocs who called for the sit-in submitted a letter to the UN Human Rights Commissioner in Bahrain, urging all international organizations, most notably the UN, to intervene and end the grave violations committed by the forces of the Saudi-backed regime. Among the violations cited are attacks against women's honor, acts of detention, the torture of women, and the demolition of mosques.
Protests broke out in a number of areas in Diyala, rejecting the provincial council's decision to declare the province an independent administrative and economic region.
Protesters marched across the streets of Bakuba, the villages of al-Khalifa County, Salam district, and Muqtadiya. They carried banners and chanted slogans rejecting division, partition, and sectarianism, and calling for national unity.
No, no to the region is the message from the residents of the two counties of Muqtadiya and al-Khalis to the provincial council, which lacked a majority vote to declare the province an administrative region, in a spontaneous and peaceful demonstration that flooded the streets of the city known as the City of Orange. Residents of Bakuba city joined the demonstration, and the masses of protesters stood in front of the provincial council building, raising their voices of condemnation and denunciation, and threatening to hold a sit-in if the provincial council insists on implementing its decision. We walked among the protesters and interviewed them about the province's declaration to be a region. Their rejection to the declaration was firm and is based on national consideration connected to the country's unity and sovereignty.
We do not accept the decision to declare this province a separate region, and we will march on this path until death.
We will not accept partition, sectarianism, and humiliation. Diyala is part of the country, and the country is one.
Even officials in the province held a firm stance on the issue and rejected the decision. Their statements were in harmony with the citizens' words.
The Council of Ministers promised us that a meeting would be convened on December 21st with His Excellency the Prime Minister. Then the problems of Diyala province will be brought forth to His Excellency the Prime Minister.
The session was not held at the Provincial Council, nor was it attended by members of the Provincial Council, nor the Chairman of the Council, nor his deputy. The law requires attendance from the Council's Chairman and his deputy in order to convene a session. Therefore, the decision at this time, in fact, serves serves terrorism and terrorists and those trying to fish in murky waters. This is the honest truth.
Others believe this step was politicized by parties inside the provincial council who are supported by politicians in the capital, Baghdad, and who in turn carry out their agendas dictated by foreign powers.
This move seemed to be rushed and politicized by a group of members in the provincial council. The evidence is that the governor and the head of provincial council did not know.
The local councils for the counties of al-Khalis, Muqtadiya, and Baquba unanimously issued a decision rejecting the province's declaration to be an administrative region. In addition, they say they will take to the streets for a sit-in if the provincial council does not retract yesterday's decision. Haidar Shakur, Al-Araqiya.
In Somalia, the joint Kenyan-Somali forces said they are preparing to advance further into the vital areas controlled by Shabab al-Mujahideen at the end of December.
These forces say their military operation in northern Somalia aims at eliminating Shabab's militants and providing necessary security for international relief organizations, as well as distributing aid to the famine-stricken people.
The joint forces halted their advance for 10 days due to a heavy rainstorm.
The rain came so late this year that the Somali lands dried out, causing a famine. Now the rain has stopped and the joint Kenyan-Somali troops did not wait long to continue their push into the vital areas controlled by Shabab al-Mujahideen. The end of December is the scheduled date for their further advance into rebel territories. Kenyan forces entered southern Somalia in mid-October after international relief workers were repeatedly targeted by Shabab's attacks. So far, their military operations have been successful in forcing Shabab to withdraw from 3 regions. Ras Kamboni is one of them. Here you find poverty, hunger, and an imminent need for international aid, which wasn't delivered due to security conditions.
They have really welcomed us here.
They welcomed us here. In addition to the security that we provide here, we cannot watch the civilians suffer. Therefore, we're providing them with limited food and medicine.
But all this is not enough for the victims of malnutrition and a war by their enemy.
I say to the Somali leaders and the international community that we need major support.
The United Nations says it needs at least $1.5 billion to fight the famine in the Horn of Africa. The famine has killed tens of thousands of Somalis so far. When the world finally took action, Shabab al-Mujahideen gave warnings to 16 relief organizations. The Shabab militants are accused of kidnapping foreign employees and attacking humanitarian aid convoys. According to Nairobi, Shabab militants planted landmines along the Kenyan-Somali border to prevent the joint forces from advancing. The danger does not change the plan aimed at ending Shabab's control over southern parts of the country, including the coastal city of Kismayo. Caught in between the joint forces and the African Union troops, which may reinforce its deployments in Somalia soon, according to the UN Secretary General, Shabab's time seems limited and its geographic realm seems at risk of dwindling.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Wyncote Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic.
continuous airwaves, a global channel of uncompromising stories. World news, documentaries, entertainment, and culture. Link TV, connecting you to the world. For more information, visit linktv.org.